What's up, people? Sunday afternoon, and I've been working on my car pretty much all weekend. I'd gotten my parts in on Friday when I came home from work, and that was my Boomba short shift, which is already installed. I did that Friday night. Today's Sunday. I started working on my RCE springs yesterday, and that job turned out to be kind of a pain, but a learning process. I managed to get the stock springs out, which are these two right here in the middle. Those go up front. And I'm going to start doing the rears. I got to run out real quick and then come back, and then I'll finish the rears. But I think lessons learned from doing the front should allow me to complete the rears faster. On the front end, I don't know if you guys have ever done strut work or suspension work, but man, that was kind of my first time doing it, and it was a pain. But I got the two front springs in. Hard to tell here. I should have taken measurements before I did it, but it's pretty clear to see the drop in height with the new springs. And if I can get up here in the wheel well, let's see. Yep, there they go. Nice and pretty yellow RCE Race Comp Engineering springs. And here's one of my wife's old shoe. I actually use these as chalk blocks, believe it or not. Yeah, ghetto, right? But it works. So what I found out is I have jack stands, and I know a lot of people either raise the car totally up or they put them up on jack stands. And what I had done yesterday, and took half the day and most of my patience and energy and a lot of sweat, but I just used the standard jack and I blocked the rear tires. And this was the first one I did, this passenger side. And I raised the car up and I managed to get the spring out, or I should say the strut. And there's a whole nother section with the strut, getting the spring off the strut. Real quick tip, if you're doing this in the future, anybody doing this, if you don't have an impact wrench, and I don't think most people do in their house, when I looked online, everybody was saying, use an impact wrench, use an impact wrench, use an impact wrench. Okay. In the strut, the bolt that runs down the shaft, there is an Allen keyhole. I didn't catch that for the longest time. I was just putting in my socket wrench, my 17mm socket wrench, and I was turning and turning and turning and turning and turning, and I didn't realize the stupid pin that runs down the shaft of the strut was spinning. After about 5 minutes, I was like, man, why isn't this thing coming off? I realized, oh man, it's spinning in the shaft. I then saw the Allen keyhole, and I was like, okay, how am I supposed to use a socket wrench and put an Allen key down in the hole? Couldn't figure it out, couldn't figure it out, couldn't figure it out. Started rummaging through my tools, looking for a tool to fit, and I came across what's known as a box wrench. Now, I didn't have a box wrench that fit. I had a 15mm one. It takes 17mm, but the curvature of this fits right down into the strut tower. So I had to go to the store and buy a 17mm box wrench. So this is how you separate the spring after you put your compression tools on to squeeze the spring down. And these cost like 20 bucks. I just got some cheapies from AutoZone. But once you have your springs compressed, just in case you don't have an impact wrench and you're doing this in your house, you stick your Allen key down in the shock tower, basically like this, into the screw, and then you use your box wrench to get the nut off, the 17mm bolt off. That's how you separate your spring from the strut. Just FYI, pro tip, lessons learned. The other thing I learned when doing the strut and getting the strut lined up with the knuckle up there, there's a knuckle, a big knuckle with two bolts, and that was the biggest ordeal. It was just very difficult for me to get off, and I just used the standard jack that came with the car and jacked up one side. So I managed to get this side muscled on late last night, and I started doing the second one because I was like, oh, I got it figured out. This should be an easy job. So I got the driver's side off pretty quickly, separated the spring from the strut, got it all mounted back together. But then when it came time to put it back in, I just gave up. I was like, I'll deal with it tomorrow. Went to bed. I was beat, man. I was beaten. So I come out today with a fresh mind, fresh energy, and the car was still jacked up. Well, I noticed the higher I jacked the car up, the more play I started getting. So I said, what if I jack the car totally up, like on a lift? So both tires are just hanging down. So I got my other jack stand out of my Magnum over there, jacked the car up, both tires up off the ground, but then I had too much play, and I still had a hard time getting it connected. And then it dawned on me. There is what's called a sway bar or stabilizer bar, and it works like a seesaw. So when one side goes up, there's pressure or torsion on the other side, the opposite side. That's when it clicked. I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to let the weight of the car do its work for me. So this is probably even easier than having the car up on a lift. I lowered the passenger side a bit. It put torsion weight on this side. And, I mean, just by using the jacks, I was able to line up the knuckle bolts without any strength needed. I mean, I literally came over here, pushed it with my hand gently, and put the bolts in. Whereas the passenger side yesterday, I had my kid out here and I had to muscle that thing into place. When if I had just used a little bit of science and engineering, I would have known, hey, put a little bit of weight on the other side and it'll free up, the opposite end because of the sway bar. So lesson learned, folks. And like I said, it's not the most safe method, but instead of having your car up on jack stands with just the weight of both tires hanging down, the 2-jack method allows you to lift and lower each side of the car, and you can let the weight of the car do the work for you if anybody happens to be doing this in the future. So I will be starting the rear end shortly, and I guess I'll have some tips for that when I get to it. But hopefully the 2-jack method works for the rear, and I'll be able to knock it out pretty quickly. Once everything is done, I will do a quick overview and then another video afterwards once I take the car out and running. But real quick, my Boomba short shift. Let's just come around to the driver's side. That was a pain in the ass. Oh my gosh, that was a pain in the ass because you have to get the car up and you have to go underneath and take the entire shock, the entire shift box out, which was a major pain. But if you can see how low my shifter is sitting now in comparison to where it was, and there were some lessons learned on that, but I'll go over all that stuff later. But yep, working as should, and my reverse, I should say. So everything's in place with that, and I'll finish my rear shocks, and I will do an overview video when everything is said and done. All right, guys.